Today is Thursday, February 4th, and we are talking about traveling to Canada and the quarantine procedures. This is the third webinar brought to you by our office, and today is our last one, so happy that you can be with us to join us. Again, on the call, same as last week, I have myself, Jennifer Hay, Immigration Advisor with Lakehead University International. I work out of the Thunder Bay campus and work directly with the immigration processing, study permits, work permits, and all that fun stuff. And I'll pass it over to my colleagues to do a quick introduction of themselves.
Morning, everyone. My name is Sara Melvin, and I am the International Student Services Coordinator within the International Department.
Good morning, I'm Katie, and I'm the International Engagement Specialist, and I'm located at the Aurelia campus in Southern Ontario.
Thanks, ladies. And I know we do quite a few of these webinars, but for those of you who don't know the way it works, there's a Q&A button right at the bottom. So feel free to post your questions in the Q&A and we can chat about them or answer them as the webinar goes on. If you have questions after today's webinar, you can email quarantine.intl@lakeheadu.ca. And don't forget to watch our events page and social media for all of our future webinars and events. So before we open it up to questions, I'm just going to pass it over to both Katie and Sara. They're going to just do a little intro and information for you guys, things to be mindful of while you're making arrangements to come to Canada.
Thanks, Jen. Morning, everybody. So today I'm going to take some time just to give a brief overview of the current Lakehead University Quarantine Commitment Plan. There's a lot of information that you need to review, and that's why we developed our own Lakehead Quarantine Commitment Plan webpage. If you haven't visited this webpage, I encourage you to do so. It has basically all of the information you need, like a one-stop shop for quarantine. I'll get one of my coworkers to put the link in the chat box, and I encourage you to copy that link and mark it in your browser if you haven't visited it already. So it's extremely important to thoroughly review all of the information on this website. Today I'm going to highlight a couple of the important points. All students that plan to travel to Canada internationally are required to have an approved quarantine commitment plan letter from their DLI, and in your case would be Lakehead, to present to CBSA at the port of entry. Additionally, they have added another pre-arrival requirement, which is having a negative COVID test to present when you board your airline, and that test has to be done 72 hours, within 72 hours of your boarding time. Only certain tests are accepted, so please ensure you read this information on the website carefully. I know everyone probably has questions about some new travel restriction announcements, and Katie's going to touch on that a little bit later in the presentation. So once you've had a chance to read and understand the information on our Quarantine Commitment Plan webpage, you can start to develop your plan, and you'll understand more about that once you've read it. So once you have your plan detailed, you can then go ahead and submit your quarantine approval letter request through that website. It's an e-form, and the link is found at the bottom of that page. Excuse me. So if you scroll down to the bottom, past all of the detailed information, you're going to see a consent box that you click next, and it sends you to the e-form, and that's your initial submission for stage 1 approval. So I'll be reviewing the plans for Thunder Bay students. Katie is going to be reviewing any submissions for the Aurelia campus students. So basically, we'll review your submission to ensure it meets the requirements of our COVID-19 readiness plan and our public health protocols. We might have some follow-up questions, so please be sure to keep an eye on your Lakehead email or the email you submitted in your form, just to avoid any delays, because if we have those follow-up questions, we can't move forward until those are answered. If your plan is approved for stage 1, we'll email you with a link to stage 2. And it's at that time that you can book your flight. Please do not book your flight until your stage 1 has been approved and we request that stage 2. So once you get that email that requests stage 2, you go ahead and book your flight, And then you can continue with stage 2, which is basically reviewing and consenting to several other important pieces of information. And then you'll also have to upload your full flight itinerary. So you can't actually complete stage 2 until you book your flight. So it's important to note that for compliance with our Lakehead COVID-19 readiness plan, only students arriving from outside of Canada that plan to live and quarantine in Thunder Bay for Thunder Bay campus students, or Aurelia for Aurelia campus students, are eligible for a quarantine approval letter. We cannot approve you to quarantine in any other location other than Thunder Bay and Aurelia. So while there's many requirements to this plan, an important piece is making sure you are registered full-time in your courses. If you need help with course registration, please reach out. We have international advisors that are happy to have a virtual meeting with you and assist you with registration if you have any concerns around that. Another question we get is about healthcare. So you'll be automatically enrolled in our university health insurance plan, also referred to as UHIP. Once we confirm you're arriving, Chris Gallinger is our International Accounts Officer, and he will enroll you in the UHIP plan for the date you arrive in Thunder Bay. For our English language program students, you are enrolled in GuardMe, but it's the same process. And this health insurance is billed to your student account, and it's a separate charge, so it's not included in your tuition. You'll see the actual UHIP charge. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some housing options for quarantine locations, because this is a really important piece of your plan. So you can choose to stay in campus residence or off campus. However, you must ensure that the off-campus housing meets the quarantine requirements laid out on the website. It's strongly recommended that our students stay in campus residence for their quarantine because they already have these quarantine procedures in place. So I don't actually have to vet the location because it's already been vetted and in place. Same goes for Aurelia and Thunder Bay. Both Thunder Bay campus and Aurelia campus have a special 14-day quarantine rate. So it's $600 for the 14 days. If you're traveling with family or dependents, they can quarantine with you on campus, and there's a cost of $50 per extra room required. This $600 does not include food. This is just for your accommodations. So you can choose to stay in residence for the quarantine period and the entire semester. Obviously, if you're staying for the full semester, that fee is separate from your quarantine fee. Your quarantine location in residence is different from your place where you're going to spend the full semester. So just something to note. You can also choose to stay in residence for your quarantine only, and when you're cleared, you can move to your off-campus housing. If you're in that situation and you do happen to need a few extra days past your 14-day quarantine, maybe you need to look for rental, you're a new student, you haven't secured anything yet, you can request up to 7 extra days past your 14-day in residence, and it'll be $50 per day if you choose to do that. Please let residents know ahead of time if you need that extended stay so they can plan for it. One thing to note is that if you do have family or dependents that you're traveling with and they're staying with you on campus, they cannot live in residence for the full semester. So residence is for students only. So if you do have family and dependents, you can quarantine in residence, but then you'll have to make arrangements for off-campus housing after that. So please plan accordingly. Another piece of our readiness plan for all students will be required to have a COVID-19 test on day 5 or 6 of their quarantine. This is for Thunder Bay. The next details are for Thunder Bay specific. So I make those arrangements for you for the testing, and it's done through our local EMS testing unit. So they'll be provided the information. You've consented to this in your stage 1 and stage 2 approval process. And then they'll come to your quarantine location on day 5 or 6. I'll let you know the date. They'll administer your test. Results come directly to me, and then I provide you those results. If you do test positive during your quarantine, you will be required to stay in quarantine for an additional 10 days from the test positive date. So that's something to note because that's extended days. So you'll need to plan for, food and laundry in that instance. Of course, we hope that that doesn't happen, but it is a very real possibility. So you're going to want to plan for that. If you're in residence quarantine and you test positive and you need those extra days, you will not be charged any additional fees. It will remain the $600, which is a really nice option for when you're staying in residence, because you don't know, what's going to happen with that. Little bit different in Aurelia, and Katie will touch on that shortly. Please remember that you can't leave your quarantine location at all for any reason that entire time. So you need to make sure your plan for food, necessities, clean clothing, medications, you need to plan for that for the entire time. You do not, in residence, you do not have access to laundry facilities until you're finished your quarantine. So you're going to want to plan for clean clothes, toiletries, shampoo, soap, anything to do with that, please plan for it. So I know I've gone over quite a bit of information in a short period of time, and it can be a little bit overwhelming, but please don't panic. All three of us are here to help you through this process and support you. We're happy to answer any questions that you have. Your safety is our #1 priority, and we want to make sure you're fully prepared before you travel. So if you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out, ask questions today, email us after. Either way. So I'm going to pass it off to Katie because she's going to talk a little bit about some Aurelia specific information and then some of those new travel announcements.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. So one point that's also part of our review when you submit your quarantine plan stage 1 is that we also check the outstanding balance on your student account. And so we're at the point in the semester where the payment deadlines have actually passed. So hopefully you've made those payments and cleared out your account. So as part of our review, we will check on that. And we do need to make sure that you don't have an outstanding balance. If you do, we will connect you with our international accounts officer, Chris Gallinger, who can work with you to process those payments, maybe make a payment plan if you need to, if you need assistance there. So that's another point that we'll be checking on. So with regards to students coming to Aurelia specifically, there are a couple small differences. You will use the same forms to submit. Now, as Sarah mentioned, those ones will come to me for review, and I'll most likely be in touch with you over email with some follow-up questions. So two of the biggest differences, the first is with regards to your transportation from the airport to your place of quarantine. And so this is through a private transportation service called the Simcoe County Airport Service. You will have a private driver and a car will be sent to the airport to pick you up. When you are issued your quarantine letter, I will also send you a separate letter that is addressed to the transportation company. So they will be watching your flight details for when it arrives and have a rough idea as to when to expect you at your meeting place. It's really important that if something happens to your flight, if it's canceled or delayed, or if you aren't able to board your flight because your COVID test hasn't been accepted, it's very, very important that you let us know so that we can let your driver know. Otherwise, they're going to be waiting at the airport for you, and it will inflict additional fees. So please let us know to the best of your ability, and those instructions will be in the first in the email that you get from us with your approval letter. So please watch for that. Another difference is that your COVID-19 test takes place on day 14. So Thunder Bay, your day 5 or day 6, and Aurelia, your day 14. So this is at the very end of your quarantine period. This is for reasons due to what our public health units in our respective areas have instructed us to do. The other difference is in order to get that COVID test, you will actually be transported to the Aurelia COVID-19 Assessment Center, and we will arrange your transportation via taxi to do this. So no worries there, but they won't be coming to your house to do this COVID test for you. As soon as you finish your COVID test, you'll be returned back to your quarantine location, and you need to return to your quarantine location as though you are still in quarantine, even though you're at day 14. And it's important that you remain in quarantine until you get your negative test result back. When you go to the testing center, they're going to give you instructions on how you will get your results. So please follow those, be checking them, and we need to receive a copy of those results before your quarantine period is complete. So as Sarah mentioned, if you're staying in residence for your quarantine period and you receive a positive test result, your additional days for quarantining are not going to be charged to you. If you are negative and you've stayed beyond the 14 days, then you will be charged at a rate of $50 per day. As of right now, given the pace at which the laboratories are able to process COVID-19 tests, it's taking about 2 business days for them to get the test results back to you. So if you're staying in residence or off campus, bank on your actual quarantine period being about 16 days. Really important to note. So it's important because we don't want you planning to move elsewhere, to make other commitments for, say, day 15, or having someone come to pick you up, because it's not likely you're going to have your test result yet, and therefore not likely that you can leave your quarantine location. So those are 2 of the most important pieces, I would say. And I don't see any other questions about quarantine plans. So maybe we'll go into, Jen, did you want to address any questions in the Q&A box around postgraduate work permit before we go into the traveling restrictions?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely saw the one question about the postgrad work permit and the courses being online. So as most institutions are now announcing that courses will be offered online for their next semester, so for our spring-summer semester, we are seeing a lot of students panicking or being concerned about being eligible for the postgraduate work permit. So as of today, the rule stands that you must complete 50% of your program in Canada. So and if you're in a 1-year program, you can complete the whole studies outside of Canada, but 2 years or more, you must still do that 50% rule. But please note that last week I sat in a meeting with an immigration advisory committee. This is made up of advisors from all the colleges and universities across Canada. IRCC also attended the meeting and asked us to complete a survey asking how many students would be impacted by the 50% rule and also from being outside of Canada. I'm happy to say there were over 100 institutions there that provided feedback. So we anticipate further support and an announcement from IRCC soon. They know that this is a really top priority for us as institutions, as well as students making decisions to study. So please note that I anticipate support from IRCC, and hopefully we will get an announcement soon. I also just wanted to say quickly about students graduating. So if you're finishing your courses in April and thinking of going home, you cannot use this quarantine process to return to Canada. Again, as Katie and Sarah have mentioned, you must be a registered student. In fact, if your classes have all been completed, you are not eligible to return to Canada on your study permit because you no longer have courses to be here for. So you have to actually apply for your postgraduate work permit once your classes are done. And then you would return to Canada with the approved work permit or work permit approval letter, as well as following the quarantine and requirements for entry for workers in Canada. So please note that that's a really important thing when thinking of traveling. Of course, with everything going on and the expenses that are added to traveling and entering Canada, we do not recommend it unless you have to travel for essential reasons. And also a little disclaimer that these travel updates, as we know, change all the time. We have gone through 4 different processes since October for helping students arrive here in Canada. So please be mindful. I know students want to plan in advance for April, but these could change next month for sure. And I'll pass it back over to Katie to talk about some of that.
Perfect. Thanks, Jen. So yes, even though you are well familiar with Lakehead's plans, we are trying our best to keep up with all the different updates we're receiving from the Government of Canada and trying to keep our students updated and bring you along with us too as things change. So if you are thinking of traveling to Canada, you need to be aware that the Government of Canada announced some new rules on international travel. And there are 2 parts to this as of right now. with the most updated information that we have. So the first part is that the government and Canada's airlines have agreed to suspend all flights to and from Mexico and the Caribbean countries until April 30th, 2021. So this was in effect as of January 31st, 2021. So for those of you who have been searching through flights, you might have already seen and noticed this throughout your searches. So that's the first piece. The second piece is that as soon as possible in the coming weeks, all air travelers arriving in Canada, with very limited exceptions, must reserve a room in a Government of Canada approved hotel for 3 nights at their own cost and take a COVID-19 molecular test on arrival, also at your own cost. At this time, we don't have any indication that international students will be exempt from these mandatory government COVID-19 testing procedures and mandatory government quarantine procedures. But the best we can do is to help you be prepared if these things come into effect and do affect international students. So some of the things you need to be prepared for include the following. The cost for all travelers, including Canadians, coming in and out is at your own expense. This could be reflected with increased fees for different flights or different connecting flights, so be prepared for that. If you're traveling to Canada during this time, you must have financial resources to pay for the government-mandated quarantine site and the COVID-19 test, and we recommend having funds up to $2,000 for 3 days and longer, and it could be more expensive if you test positive for COVID-19. We ask that you be prepared to be delayed, and part of that means that you should be prepared to have a rebookable flight, especially if you are connecting to Thunder Bay from Pearson in Toronto. If this does take effect, you'll need to contact us and let us know once you've arrived in Canada and about your COVID-19 test result as soon as you know it, so that we can then assist you with planning your arrival to Lakehead. As of right now, the Government of Canada quarantine plan, if it comes into effect, is separate from the Lakehead University quarantine plan, okay? So please keep those things separately. As for the Lakehead University plan, nothing has changed as of yet. We are still using the same procedure and process of our 14 days and all the different features and facts that Sara and I have already gone over. So at this time, we don't have the exact date that this will go into effect. However, in order to help you prepare, we have added a few additional points to our website. You'll see there's a blue box right at the top of our quarantine page, the link that we posted in the chat box. That gives the most recent update we have with respect to these Government of Canada updates. And then as you complete the plan, there will be a few different check boxes that encourage you to reflect and reflect on whether you can commit to these potential implications if they should come into effect. So please know that those will be there at some point, even if they are not in effect right now. We want to make sure that you're covered and that you're thinking of these things because it could come into effect at any point in time, including while you are literally in the air. So we're just trying to make you as prepared as possible. So I will put a couple links in the chat box here from the Government of Canada website, so you can do some more reading on your own. The best thing you can do is read as much as you can, be as informed as you can, and continue watching the Government of Canada website for updates, as well as watching your Lakehead email account for updates. We're trying to get information to you as soon as possible. But again, please know that when these changes come into effect, these additional costs and implications will be the responsibility of the student to address and fulfill. So I think that's it for me regarding new travel updates.
Thanks, Katie. And I know students, that's a lot of information to take. So don't worry, we are recording this webinar and we'll post it on with our presentations like the other ones we have. Please, again, the Q&A is open. So if you have any questions, feel free to post them in there. Again, if you rather speak privately about your situation, the email is also available on the screen here. And don't forget, we have lots of wonderful webinars happening every day, all day. So connect with us on social media, on our Facebook and Instagram page to see other fun events that are going on and events to help you, be a successful student here. We know that this COVID has been going on for too long for all of us, and we're all impacted, and understand that students have had long processing delays and waiting to get the visa approved. and maybe not having the best welcome as we would like to have for in Canada, but please note that we're all in this together and we're doing our best to help support you and help you arrive here in Canada with a warm Canadian welcome, as we like to say. I'll just take a look. I think we had one question come in. One question asking, is $2,000 for 3 days expensive? And do we have to pay the university again for the quarantine? So $2,000 is expensive for 3 days. Of course, it is an expensive expense for anybody. And yes, as Katie has mentioned, the Government of Canada requirements to enter would be for anybody entering. And the Lakehead requirements are specifically for students. And this is our requirements for us to be, for our public health to approve us to be able to accept you. So I do understand how vigorous it's going to seem and intense, but please understand that we are doing our best to help you arrive during the COVID-19 time. The recordings are posted in my presentation folder. I guess I can quickly, I'm just going to exit out of here and I can share that link with you guys.
Thanks, Jen. Couple notes, I'll just review some sort of commonly asked questions. We often get asked about food and food plans. And so if you're staying on campus residence, you have a couple options. So you can opt for the meal plan, which will provide you with breakfast, lunch, and dinner, so 3 meals a day to your residence room. And while I go over this, please note this is specific to Thunder Bay. I'll let Katie touch on Aurelia because it's a little bit different. So you can opt for the meal plan. I believe it's $19.86 a day in addition to the 600 for your accommodations. So that's a meal plan. All of the locations where you're quarantined have full kitchens and a kitchen tote with supplies for cooking. And so if you prefer to cook for yourself, then you can order groceries from our Aramark food services, or you can choose to order groceries from the community, from places like Walmart. You can use Instacart, places like Superstore, anywhere really that will deliver your groceries to your location in a contactless manner. So there's a few. So food's a big one because you can't leave, so you need to be fully aware of how you're going to get yourself the food and basic necessities while you're here. Yes, you're going to pack as much as you can in regards to toiletries and different things, but food's a big one. So we want to make sure that you're prepared before you come. Another one, frequently asked question is about the cell phone, working Canadian cell phone number that we continually ask you for. So returning students, usually not an issue, but for new students, this can be challenging. You haven't been in Canada yet. You're arriving, you can't go anywhere to get a cell phone. And so we're suggesting a few different things that you can do. One, you can get an international roaming plan, which is recommended. If you don't have to use it, great, because I know they can be expensive, but if you need it, it's there and you may need it. We need to be able to call you. Email isn't enough. If I need to contact you, if Katie does, if public health needs to call you, which they do for check-ins, we need a working phone number. You can also download WhatsApp. Both of our emergency on-call phones have WhatsApp, so you can call and text them. But the big one with WhatsApp is once you're here and connected to internet, we can call it through WhatsApp. Another option is ordering a SIM card ahead of time and having it delivered to your quarantine location. That's another option. So lots to think about. I'll let Katie just touch on the food stuff for Aurelia.
Yeah, sure. So the Aurelia residence is a little bit of a different setup than Thunder Bay. In Aurelia, you're not in apartment style, you're in your own room. So that room has all the things that you need. It has your own private bathroom. But because it doesn't have a kitchen, you do have the option of opting into the meal plan through the university cafeteria, and your meals will be delivered directly to your room. If you are arriving a little bit late, the first meal will be in your fridge waiting for you when you do arrive. I would highly recommend opting into the meal plan. It's much easier on you, and it's fairly cost effective at about $22 per day. And then it's taken care of. You do have alternate options to make use of grocery delivery and pre-prepared food delivery. services, for example, through Skip the Dishes or private delivery services. But remember that a lot of things that you are doing, ordering online and purchasing online, require you to have often a Canadian credit card, which you might not be able to get until you're actually in Canada. On that note, we can give you a suggestion as to how you can apply for a credit card and a bank account when you get to Canada, but you won't be able to do that before you arrive here. So for this reason, again, one of the questions we ask you is how do you plan to financially support yourself? What funds are you bringing with you? How will you cover funds or costs for food and other necessities that you might need to access? So opting into the meal plans are a great way to take care of a big majority of those worries and expenses. I'll also just note that the $600 quarantine packages that are being offered at both Thunder Bay and Aurelia are a really, really great value. We have had some students who have chosen to quarantine off campus and make their own arrangements, but I can tell you that those situations are more than likely more expensive. But you also have the added value, if you're staying in residence, of security on campus 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There are also residence staff around, like residence assistants, people on the residence front desk. So there are always people around to support you that are very, very close by. We also have very close working relationships with our residence teams to assist us in supporting you as well. So we highly recommend that. Let me see here. Yeah, I talked about bank account. I think that's it.
A few questions did come into the chat. One question, I plan to drive my personal vehicle from the US to Canada. Do I need to get a COVID test before arriving?
Yes, so initially when they first put the COVID test 72 hours before boarding, it was for flights. And then shortly after that, they broadened that to include all land border crossings. So if you are driving up and going through a land border, that also applies now.
Perfect. And then the next question, since we have to go through 3 days mandatory quarantine in Toronto, should we book our flights only to Toronto? I'm assuming they're connecting to Thunder Bay.
Yeah, so flights have been now funneled into 4 of the hub cities. So that's Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary, Montreal. I think I have that right. And so potentially you can go through any of those 4 hubs, but we recommend coming through Toronto, Montreal specifically. I mean, all of these larger cities have higher numbers of cases. But for me and what I've seen from our experiences, I think the best route would be through Toronto. And then because what I'm seeing is if students are trying to go through Montreal, I had a student recently, he's got several connecting flights, then he's going through Montreal, then he's still having to come to Toronto and then to Thunder Bay. So that's needless travel, and you're putting yourself at a higher risk for exposure the more flights that you have. So the more direct flight you can take, please do so. Another thing to note when you're booking your flights is overnight layovers. You cannot have a layover for more than 48 hours. The government of Canada does not feel that you require more than 48 hours to be able to get a connecting flight. So you can't have a 3 or 4 day layover between your connecting flights. Your maximum would be a 2-day, 48-hour layover. Usually it's only a 1-night layover that I've seen. If you're arriving to Toronto, let's say later in the day, and you can't get that connecting flight to Thunder Bay, it's usually only 1 day. You will be responsible to book into an airport hotel. If you do have a layover, they will not allow you to sleep or lounge in the airport. So that's something to consider in your financial planning. If you have a layover, you'll need to book the hotel. Now, with this said, this is sort of how it is now. If this, when this testing upon arrival / quarantine in a hotel comes into place, this is going to change because obviously you're going to have to stay in a hotel anyways and pre-book it. So it'll be a little bit different at that point. You're still going to need to book your connecting flight to Thunder Bay. You just need to make sure that flight is flexible and rebookable.
Perfect. Maybe something else. Okay, so that's technically the last question that we had. So I know this is the third week we've done it, so lots of good questions have come in over the last 3 weeks. I will post this one as well into our past presentation, so feel free to check it out if you feel like you missed anything. Still a few minutes left if anybody wants to ask anything else. But just so you know, here's our channels for social media. We have Lakehead University International, our Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube channel. If you haven't been to our campus, and today is actually a beautiful snowfall day here in Thunder Bay, we do invite you to go to our tours page. You can take a virtual tour and get to know our campus before even arriving here. As always, I'd like to thank both my coworkers, Sara and Katie, for coming on and tackling all the questions. They are the ones behind the scenes answering all your emails, so definitely working very hard to help all of our students in the last few months during the quarantine arrival time. I'll pass it over if you guys have anything last you want to throw in there.
I don't think I have anything else to add. I just encourage you, if you have questions, please email the address that we had posted earlier. It's best to get all your answers in advance. Be prepared. The more knowledge you have, the more confident you're going to be in having a smooth arrival. So reach out with all your questions.
Absolutely. We're here to help you. So, don't hesitate. There's no silly questions. So if you're unsure about any part of the process, just reach out, and please plan ahead, because that first stage 1 can take up to 72 hours to process. Depends on your situation, depends on if we have a lot of follow-ups or vetting of an off-campus location. Sometimes that takes a little bit longer. And then when you submit your stage 2, that can take up to 48 hours, so 2 days. Please note that these times don't include holidays and weekends. So if you submit on a Friday, Saturday and Sunday doesn't count. So the 4 days would be Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So keep that in mind. You're not to book your flights until your stage 1 is approved. And so, that piece shouldn't be a problem. I know I've had some students that have booked their flights ahead of time, which is a big no-no, but it happens. And so, we work with that, but please just be mindful of that when you're doing your planning. Plan ahead.
The other point I'll add in there is that there's actually a provincial holiday coming up on Monday, February 15th. So the university will be closed, and so that would be just treated the same as a weekend. So staff won't be reviewing quarantine plans on that day. So just something to be aware of when you're considering your travel plans.
Thanks, ladies, and happy Thursday, everybody. Go out and enjoy your day, and thanks for joining us this morning. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Everyone, bye.